The evil and heartless nature of Russia's regime has been on display time and time again since the country illegally invaded Ukraine. It's bombed schools and hospitals, killed countless civilians, abducted children, and tortured prisoners of war. Now, as further evidence that Putin's evils know no limits, a report has emerged revealing how Russia forcibly recruits Central Asian migrants to use as cannon fodder in its war machine, marching them straight to their deaths on the front lines of Ukraine. The news concerns citizens from several Central Asian countries and former Soviet republics, including Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Armenia, and Kazakhstan. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people from these nations head to Russia, often in search of steady work and a better life due to economic instability, poor living conditions, or a lack of opportunities in their home nations. Historically, many of these migrants ended up in low-paying, low-skilled labor, working in fields like construction, agriculture, transportation, cleaning, and utilities. They play a vast role in Russian life and the economy, helping to keep the service industry up and running and contributing in numerous other fields. But over the years, there have been many reports of these workers being exploited, receiving poor wages for long hours of hard work, living in squalid homes, with some even forced into conditions of modern slavery. Indeed, to some, it appears that these migrants are viewed as less valuable and important as Russian citizens and less worthy of a good life. It should come as no surprise then that Russia has found a new and far more terrible way to exploit these people, tricking them into joining its war effort and sending them to die. The news comes from a report shared by the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine agency, which shared a post on its official Telegram account detailing the discovery. Migrant workers as cannon fodder. Russia forcibly recruits citizens of Central Asia for the war against Ukraine. Citizens of Central Asian countries, in particular Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, are increasingly becoming targets of forced mobilization carried out by Russian security forces. This primarily concerns migrant workers who come to Russia in search of work. Representatives of the Russian army are deceiving foreigners with promises of quick earnings on short-term contracts. In reality, the chances of not only earning money but also surviving are minimal. Most of these volunteers are killed. Now, this isn't the first time Russia has used money as an incentive to bolster its military ranks. As part of President Putin's big recruitment drive, through which he hopes to increase the size of the Russian army to 1.5 million soldiers, Russia has been offering cash rewards for able-bodied men who join the fight. Putin originally set a flat bonus rate of 400,000 rubles, around $5,000. However, various regional governors across Russia decided to increase the bonus, likely in the hopes of impressing the Kremlin by increasing their region's recruitment figures. Many regions offered a whopping 1 million rubles, over $12,000 for example, while others went even further, all the way up to 4 million rubles, around $50,000 in total. Many young Russian men, perhaps failing to find steady employment elsewhere, have been swayed by these financial incentives, joining the fight to help provide for their families. But they, at least, had a choice about whether to enlist or not. If the recent reports are to be believed, many migrants are not given that same choice. Instead, they're forcibly, maliciously, and deceptively recruited to the Russian ranks. Many who arrive in Russia looking for a steady job are promised fast cash for signing up for short-term military contracts. What they aren't told, however, is that they're almost certain to be dispatched to the most dangerous areas along the front lines and used as cannon fodder, with the vast majority unlikely to ever return to their homes. A large number of these migrants, desperate for money to support their families, are lured by the promises of high pay, especially as they know how difficult or even impossible it would be for them to make that kind of cash in the usual menial jobs they tend to fill. Abdullah, a migrant from Tajikistan, was one of them. Interviewed by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in 2024, he explained why he and others like him joined the cause. Yes, there are a lot of guys from Tajikistan, from Uzbekistan, from Kyrgyzstan, from Kazakhstan. I did it for the sake of my child, to be honest. I have one child and he's sick, let's say. I had no choice, but it worked out, let's say, for the sake of money. Now everyone goes for the sake of money. Other migrants and soldiers interviewed by Radio Liberty painted a grim picture of the realities of the war. Aman, for example, who was born in Russia but has Kazakh origins, had been fighting on the front for 6 months when he was interviewed. He called his decision to enlist a one-way ticket, adding that chances of survival were 1 in a million. He also explained how so much of the war is dominated by artillery fire and explosions, and that lives can end in an instant as shells fly repeatedly between one side and the other. This isn't Chechnya, this isn't the war in Syria. You probably don't even need a machine gun here, only shells fly back and forth. If a tanker gets hit, that's it. The tank burns up, the people. This is a spaceport, everything flies. You won't even have time to get there, to the front. It's very scary. Another soldier, this one Russian, issued a stark warning for any migrants considering joining the fight. He should think 1,000 times before coming here. The money is good, yes, he will receive it monthly. The guys who came from Moscow, some are still alive, some are no longer alive. For example, many of us died from the villages, some went missing. Then you will look for him and you still won't find him. Many are lying here on the front line and they can't get them out. Even a Russian recruiter, interviewed by the media, acknowledged that the migrant recruits are given only minimal training before being thrust into battle with slim odds of survival. This is the special military operation. This is war. They will teach him how to hold a machine gun for 2 weeks and then off he goes. It's all scary and dangerous. Well, you understand, this is war. They kill there. They injure and very often kill with shrapnel from drones, from artillery. In spite of the warnings and grim realities of being deployed to the front lines, many migrants still join. And while many do it for the money and the hope that they can serve out a short-term contract, stay alive and head home, others are more forcibly pressured into enlisting. For example, some people from Central Asian nations, even those who have received Russian citizenship and followed all the relevant legal procedures to stay in the country, are threatened with lengthy spells behind bars or even deportation unless they join the fight. Again, in an interview with Radio Liberty, one woman, a Central Asian migrant named Aizakun, who's lived in Russia with her family for many years and even received Russian passports around 10 years ago, shared the story of how her husband was taken from her and their 4 children. They came, said he was a specialist and took him away. They didn't say anything about the special military operation. She also wasn't told anything about any payment for her husband's enlistment and has since had to suffer and struggle to look after the children alone, wondering if her partner has been wounded or killed or if she'll ever see him again. The same applies to the families of around 20,000 naturalized migrants, many from Central Asian nations, who have been forced to join the fight in Ukraine after they allegedly failed to register for military service. On May 20, at the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum, the chairman of the Investigative Committee of Russia, Alexander Bastrikin, announced, already 20,000 young citizens of Russia who for some reason do not like living in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan are on the front lines. He went on to explain that he had ordered law enforcement officers, military investigators, and the National Guard of Russia to carry out raids in areas of high migrant populations in the hopes of catching more migrants to send to Ukraine. Bastrikin has been particularly cruel in his concentration on citizens of non-Russian origin since the war began, making multiple bold statements and suggestions about how they should be treated. In October 2023, for example, he stated that migrants should be stripped of their citizenship if they refuse to join the war. If, as a citizen of the Russian Federation, one is not ready to fulfill one's military duty, one should be deprived of Russian citizenship. Bastrikin has also gone on record as saying that when a migrant receives their passport, they should also be immediately registered for military service, and has repeatedly stated that naturalized citizens should be among the top targets for forced recruitment. He's even admitted that the raids on migrant communities are not only a way to forcibly recruit more men for the war effort, but also to frighten and intimidate people of Central Asian origin to leave the country. These are people who are often looking for little more than a safe home for their families and a steady source of income to provide for them. But they are being treated as little more than dispensable pieces of meat for the Russian war machine. And the statistics make for grim reading. The Ukraine Defense Ministry recently published a report called Hochu Zit, or I Want to Live in English, detailing the numbers of Central Asians that have been recruited and killed. According to the report, more than 100 Uzbek nationals have been killed, as well as close to 200 Tajiks and dozens of citizens from Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan. The majority of these people were likely to have previously worked simple jobs on the streets of Russia, like street cleaners or construction workers. They were not military men. They didn't have the training, experience, or expertise needed to survive in the field of combat, but were still thrust into life or death situations with gunfire and explosions ringing out around them. And the same is still happening to thousands of other Central Asians day in and day out on the front lines of Ukraine. What's more, given that Russia recently crossed the grim milestone of 1 million total casualties, with an estimated 250,000 soldiers killed and hundreds of thousands more injured in combat, it's likely that the true numbers of Central Asian deaths and injuries are much higher than what's been reported. Part of what makes these people so vulnerable is their legal situation. Even though Russia takes in large numbers of Central Asian migrants each year, it takes time to process and register them all, and the path to citizenship is long and difficult. Without citizenship, migrants lack the rights and protections afforded to native Russians, putting them in a particularly tricky position. And Russia has been targeting and tricking these kinds of people since the very early days of its invasion. In May 2022, for example, an Uzbek soldier was caught on camera in Luhansk wearing a Russian military uniform. He revealed that he had been recruited due to his military experience in Afghanistan, but received just $590 a month in compensation, a far cry from the $4,000 monthly salaries promised by recruiters in Moscow. Later that year, in September, the Duma passed a law that fast-tracked citizenship in exchange for military service, enticing many migrants to join the fight in order to obtain more rights and privileges in Russia. The only problem there is that many of those migrants would never actually make it home to enjoy those privileges. In May 2023, the private military company known as the Wagner Group also carried out major recruitment drives aimed at migrants, again using false promises and exaggerated incentives to lure naive and desperate recruits to its ranks. And those who join up, either willingly or through force or coercion, soon come to understand the harsh reality of their situation. The high cash payouts and monthly salaries rarely materialize, with many only seeing a fraction of the money they were promised, and their dreams of citizenship and a better life will almost never come to pass. Instead, as the original Telegram post from the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine explains, separate units are formed from mobilized migrants, which are mainly used in the most dangerous areas of the front. This shows just how evil Russia's regime and top military commanders truly are. Not content with forcing desperate and innocent people away from their homes and families, they also made the decision to create entire units of these migrants who lack training and military experience and send them to the harshest and most dangerous places, where they're almost sure to be either injured at best or killed. And for those lucky and rare few who do somehow survive, the situation is unlikely to get better, even if they're allowed to return home. The Defense Intelligence post continues, even if they survive after serving at the front, such combatants cannot return to normal life. In their countries of origin, they face criminal prosecution for participating in the armed forces of a foreign state with a prospect of long-term imprisonment. So, even if an Uzbek, a Tajik or a Kazakh national manages to make it through the war, they're not only unlikely to see the money and benefits they were promised by the Russian government, but also have little chance of returning to their home nations without prosecution and punishment. They're stuck in a lose-lose situation, with pressure and intimidation from all sides, and almost no chance of actually getting the only things they want: safety, shelter, and support for themselves and their loved ones. As Valentina Chupik, an Uzbekistan-born Russian lawyer, puts it, labour migrants are treated as cannon fodder. It's called voluntary service, but migrants know that refusing can mean deportation or far worse. Chupik also issued a stark warning to any and all migrants still living in Russia. Dear migrants who have Russian relatives or who foolishly acquired Russian citizenship, run immediately. As for the rest, I also advise running. Many would be wise to take her advice. Even if they face a lack of opportunity in their homelands, like Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, these people would, at the very least, be safe from forceful enlistment, injury, and death in those places. It's worth noting too that Central Asians aren't the only foreign nationals to be thrust into the firing lines by the Russians. They've also treated thousands of troops from North Korea as mere cannon fodder, with a recent report from the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence, MOD, suggesting that thousands of North Koreans had been killed or injured so far. Those troops joined the fight late in 2024, with sources suggesting that between 11,000 and 14,000 North Koreans had been transported to Russia, where they were rushed through an intensive training program before being deployed to dangerous hotspots around the Kursk Oblast to reclaim towns and territories taken over by Ukraine's armed forces. Many were killed or injured soon after their arrival, likely due to their lack of training, as well as the fact that they were thrust into a very unfamiliar environment. North Korea is largely a mountainous territory, with around 80% of the country covered in mountains and hills. In contrast, around 95% of Ukraine is flat land, mostly made up of plains with only small mountainous areas far to the west, away from the front lines. As such, it's easy to see how North Korean troops would be taken aback by the terrain, putting them at an instant disadvantage. And while recent reports suggest that some have been able to adapt to the conditions and help the Russian forces reclaim most of its cursed territory, many have either lost their lives or been sent home with life-changing long-term injuries. As the Defense Intelligence Update from the UK MOD states, Democratic People's Republic of Korea (DPRK) forces have likely sustained more than 6,000 casualties in offensive combat operations against Ukrainian forces in the Russian oblast of Kursk. The total casualties amount to more than half of the approximately 11,000 DPRK troops initially deployed to the Kursk region. Open source reports suggest DPRK has subsequently deployed limited numbers of additional troops to Kursk. Significant DPRK casualty rates have almost certainly been sustained primarily through large, high attritional dismounted assaults. Now, despite these heavy losses, North Korea's supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, has made the call to send no fewer than 6,000 more of his people to Russia, including construction workers, to help rebuild damaged and destroyed infrastructure, and military engineers or sappers tasked with defusing the many anti-tank and anti-personnel mines scattered across the region by Ukraine's armed forces. Like the Central Asians, the North Koreans are said to have been promised financial incentives and decent salaries for making the trip to Russia and laying their lives on the line. But also, like the Central Asians, it's unlikely they'll see much or even any of that money, with experts like Bruce W. Bennett, a North Korea specialist at RAND, stating, "I suspect that money coming from Russia is going directly to the party and then on to the Kim family," before adding that perhaps only a small amount or even nothing would be paid to the soldiers themselves. These stories illustrate the brutal and unfair realities of this war, not only for the countless Ukrainians who have been injured or lost their lives and seen their homes, towns and cities reduced to rubble, but also for the unfortunate and numerous individuals unwillingly tricked or forced into fighting on the Russian side, treated more like animals than human beings, thrown into the fire of the front lines without an ounce of regard or respect for their lives, or the lives and futures of their children and families. Truly, Russia's evil has no limits. Now, find out more about Russia's cruel treatment of troops from other countries in our recent videos about Iranian soldiers in Ukraine and the 6,000 North Koreans soon set to arrive to rebuild Kursk. And be sure to subscribe to our trusted news channel too for regular updates from the front lines.